and see if we have anybody else. We have 6 members. A couple more.
And actually we have, it looks like Lisa, who was an alternate
To violence.
North region, she's in as an attendee, so we don't have all of the North region positions present, so we could pull her in if certainly if we need.
Who is that, Howard?
Lisa who? I just see her name under the attendees. Oh, and now I see.
Oh,
Cynthia
now there's a
Manning
bunch
there.
of attendees. Hold on a second here.
Yeah, move Cynthia up to be a panelist. And then move
Cynthia.
Lisa Hugh up to be a panelist.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
Oh, there's Anna Olivia. Okay.
This is Vaughn. You unmuted me for some reason.
Buddy.
Yvonne, we're getting things set. So Lori Vaughn is an attendee. So
Oh, okay.
He noted that you had
Having trouble
muted him,
hearing.
so-
Can you guys hear me now?
yeah,
Can someone say something because I can't hear you?
yeah, we can hear you, Anna Olivia.
Nope. Let me try calling back in.
I don't see Vaughn on the list.
He's an attendee. And
Oh,
He's an attendee, Lori. He just
I need
noted that you unmuted him and you should not have unmuted.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Appropriately an attendee. He's not a panelist.
So I need to move him back.
You don't need to move him anywhere. I think he's in the right place. He's listed as an attendee. Simply noted that he was inadvertently unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's 9 members in present, I think.
I think we certainly have enough for a quorum, but since Anna Olivia is the chair and seems to be dialing in, maybe we'll give it one more minute and let her join.
See if
before
she
we-
can get on. Yeah. Okay.
I successfully made it into the meeting.
Yes.
Anna Olivia is here.
Now I can hear you. That's fantastic.
Anna Olivia, we have a quorum, and I know you had been virtually introduced to Lori Frontella for your benefit and for all of the CAC members. Lori is our temporary clerk for EBC as Adrian continues to be out here for an indefinite period of time. So we're really happy and pleased to have Lori help fill his shoes here over the short and medium term until he's back. And this is her first meeting that she is clerking with us. So please bear with us, obviously, as she gets up to speed with our various processes and certainly with the names and faces here as part of the CAC. But she does have 30 years of clerking experience with Pismo Beach, so she certainly knows what she's doing. Just needs to get a handle for this new setting. So With that, we have a quorum, and I'll hand it over to you, Olivia and Lori, to manage meeting.
Thank you so much and welcome, Lori. We will call this meeting to order today, December 13th of the East Bay Community Energy Community Advisory Committee. Lori, would you please do roll call?
Yes. Member Sutter,
Present.
Member Pacheco,
Present.
Member Souza. Oh, that's an alternate, excuse me. Member Lou, is it Lou?
Yes, present.
That's an alternate. Branch, Member Branch. And Anna Olivia Allred, Chair, is here. Landry, Member Landry. No. Member Who, is it Hugh?
Present.
Thank you. Member is it Molzenberger?
Mutzenberg and here.
Molzenberg, thank you. Member Riata? That's alternate. Member Swaminathan?
Present. Yeah.
Thank you. Member Larksman?
Yeah, I'm here.
Member Raha? Araha? Member Hernandez at large?
Present.
Member Lutz at large?
I'm here.
Thank you.
And
We have a quorum.
Landry, I'm sorry, Member Landry is here.
Oh, dear, I'm
Yes.
so sorry.
She's-
Else I did not call?
We
she's
would
back
like
to an
you,
attendee.
we would like you to do attendance for the alternates and
Oh, okay.
determine if any of the it's okay, we have our own system. It will take a minute to get used to, and determine if any of the alternates are needed to serve by region.
Okay. Alternate member Souza?
Could I also, one other quick note, member Landry's in the attendees, but actually needs to be promoted to panelist. So Cynthia Landry is listed there under attendees.
Okay. And member Riata?
Present.
Present? Thank you. Member, I already did Lisa. I believe that's all the alternates that I have. Oh, member Dugan.
Here.
Did call her. I believe that's all. Let me move over Landry.
Thank you.
I believe that's all, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have quorum, and will any of the alternates be needed to serve in a voting position this evening?
We have 2 from Central in attendance, 2 members from the East, which is 1 is alternate. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 from the North that are present, 2 from San Joaquin that are present, 2 from the South that are present, and 2 at large.
So I think if I can help take a little inventory here,
That'd be
I
great.
think for North Region, 3 seats, and Anna Olivia, of course, is here. Cynthia Landry is here. Jane Frank is absent, so I think Lisa, who's sitting in that position, makes
Oh,
sense. So we'll have Lisa, who's sitting as an alternate there. And then under the East region, I believe Joel Liu is here. So Kate Duggan, you're not needed in a sort of in a voting position here. I think South, we're all set there. There are no alternates. In Central, we have Mary Sutter here, and we have Ernie Pacheco here. So I don't recall actually if Lorraine Souza is even here, but that would not be needed. And then under the San Joaquin region, William Mutzenberg is here. And so Harmon Raitia is, I don't even know if he's here or is not.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
sorry. So you are not, you're not needed to sit in the action seat either.
Yeah.
Okay, and just to remind you that even if you are not serving in a voting role tonight, that your participation and your comments are absolutely needed at all times. And that we really appreciate you being here, even if you are not voting, because it's really difficult to get folks up to speed on these topics unless they've been listening to them for a period of time. So just really thank you for being here, whether or not you are voting. Your presence and your contributions are still both wanted and needed. So with that, we will go to agenda item 2, which is the swearing in of new members and oath of office. We would like to welcome Jim Lutz and Ed Hernandez, who will be sworn in as at-large members. Lori, are you doing that portion?
Yes, I can do that for you. Thank you.
Thank
you. Ed and Jim, do you have your video on? Ed does.
I'm
Is
here.
Jim here? There you are. Okay. You want to please raise your right hand and repeat after me. The first, I will ask you I, and you will state your name, and then you can repeat together. So I
Ed Hernandez,
Jim Lutz,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will
that I will
support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the
of the
United States,
the Constitution of the State of California,
the Constitution of the State of California,
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance,
I will
that
bear
I
true
will
faith and allegiance.
and that I take this obligation freely
I take this
and
obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any
without any
mental
mental
reservation
Yes.
or purpose of evasion,
or
Purpose
purpose of evasion.
and that I will well and faithfully
And that I
Will
will
well
well
and
and
faithfully
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the
charge the
duties of the office
on which I am about to enter.
on which I am about to enter.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for joining this. It really is a momentous occasion that we have so many folks here with a really good geographic representation, as well as a lot of different perspectives and new voices joining this team. And we are really grateful to have you. So yeah, thanks. The next agenda item is the chair report. And at this time, I would ask Vice Chair, if you could please help this evening taking some notes so that as we go back to the board, if you could help take some notes tonight, I would really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so at the last meeting, our 2 new at-large members were appointed and we just swore them in. So that was huge news. The other things that came up through the meeting is that, I think I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Sorry, I have a report up, but I think I actually pulled up the wrong report. There it is. So Dan Cowell put forth a motion for a special meeting of the board to discuss a resolution to submit to the CPUC regarding NEM policy. Which I believe did pass. the PG&E carbon-free allocation. In the discussion, it was clear that last year, EBC was not able to sell the nuclear that it had accepted. So they recommended that we do not take it this year. It passed with a couple comments recognizing the negative impacts of large hydro on the environment and native communities, and some comments in support of nuclear. So the result of that action is that EBCE did accept the carbon-free allocation associated with large hydropower, but did not accept the allocation associated with nuclear, which was the recommendation of this body as well as staff. The question of the block grants, of which we supported, was delayed until the December meeting, and then I believe again delayed until January. So that's sort of the summary of what happened at the last meeting. Were there any public comments submitted or members of the public with their hands raised to speak on this topic?
Yes, I do have a hand raised.
Great, and I recognize that I skipped public comment. Somehow that did not. Oh yeah, that goes next. Okay, perfect. So who has their hand raised? Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing here.
Oh, the hands went down. Maybe they thought that was, oh, here's another one. Joan Taylor.
Great. Joan, will recognize you for 3 minutes.
Question, is this public comment or on the nuclear?
No, this would be comment on the report that I just gave back from the last meeting. The next item is for public comment reserved for members of the public who would like to speak on items not on this agenda.
I will wait for that. Thank you.
Perfect. And I would like to remind our panelists that while the chat function is enabled, that we are encouraged not to use it because it is not necessarily accessible to the public, and that everything put into it is subject to public disclosure. So with that, we will go on to the next item, which is public comment. I believe that we will recognize Joan first, and again,
excuse me, Madam Chair, I had my hand raised after the public comment because I wanted to ask a question about your report, please.
Oh, great. So Cynthia, go for it.
Okay, so
before we go to public comment, go for it.
Yes, okay. So one of the things I wanted to follow up with, I was not able to listen into the board meeting, the last board meeting, but I wanted to ask about two things. The resolution that you just had spoken about, I'd like to, you know, just, I know it's about the solar, you know, the net metering, but if you could just tell me what or Howard, if he's here, what the resolution was that passed. And secondly, did the issue of the call center come up?
So the call center was not part of the discussion, unless I'm wrong, Howard.
No, I don't think there were, yeah, the call center was not any focal, you know, I don't think there was any active discussion regarding call center.
Excellent.
Okay, but
and
but that was on the, but that was on the previous board meeting. And am I right, Howard, that there's going to be a report back to the board in 6 months relative to the progress of the in-house call center?
I think that's right, yes.
Okay.
That part is right, but there's been no discussion since that point in time.
Okay, okay. And then my second question about the resolution, Ann, please.
Absolutely. So there was an issue that was brought forth by community members that we discussed last month at our meeting involving net energy metering and a proposed decision that's coming up from the CPUC. And the kind of the total, I'm going to try and do this with video. If my internet gets wonky, I'll just have to turn it back off. Kind of the summary is that there is the potential for a decision to come out of the CPUC that would pretty dramatically change the financial impact of net energy metering for solar customers. And this body recommended to the board that they take a strong stance, not only in support of rooftop solar and net energy metering programs, but that they do something proactively. Member Kalb actually brought to the board meeting a resolution doing just exactly that, strongly supporting net energy metering and rooftop solar policies, not only in our service territory, but also statewide, and moved a resolution through a special meeting of the board, which did pass, to submit this resolution to the CPUC in support of these things. I would be happy to send everyone a copy of, or really truly it would be staff sending us all a copy of that resolution. It is in alignment with what this body recommended.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like additional details, I'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards on that.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, let's move to public comment. Again, this is an item that is reserved for members of the public who wish to speak on something that is not on our agenda. And Joan, you should go first with 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Joan Taylor. I am chair of the California Nevada Desert Energy Committee of Sierra Club. While Sierra Club prioritizes energy conservation, efficiency, and local renewables, it also supports large-scale solar and wind. But a decade ago, the federal stimulus bill created a solar gold rush in the desert. And developers were coming into pristine public lands demanding that they must develop their full power purchase megawatts, no matter what sensitive biological resources might be destroyed. That's why the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, DRECP for short, was developed to provide an explicit and detailed roadmap of where and how renewable development can be streamlined and still preserve essential resources and ecosystem processes on desert public land. That effort took 8 years and a broad range of stakeholders, including utilities, to hammer out a compromise with specific conservation management actions, plus detailed maps of resources to provide certainty for developers of what to expect when in DRECP. Desert lands are very fragile, intact, and slow to heal. Even lands designated as development focus areas include critical habitat, rare riparian communities, and essential habitat connections. It's these DRECP management prescriptions that Intersect Power's Oberon Solar Project, with whom you have a PPA, threatens. It is commendable that the project is proposed in a designated focus area. However, Intersect claims that it needs to generate 500 megawatts and that justifies bypassing and redefining DRECP's clear management actions for protecting riparian areas and the ecosystem connectivity leakage that runs through the project. Intersect's Oberon is only the third project to be processed under the aegis of DRECP. Clearway Energy proposed and designed the first 2 projects, and they are consistent with DRECP. Federal and state agencies had developed an alternative called DRECP compliant that would generate at least 375 megawatts and likely 400 or more using various other design options. The club supports that compliant alternative, but 500 megawatts clearly too large a project for Intersect's application area, which Intersect purposely shrunk by 1,500 acres late last year. There's really no justification for changing the rules for Oberon because DRECP's management prescriptions and the constraints of the site were clearly spelled out well in advance, and others have honored this. The conservation community remains very concerned about the serious threat this project poses to the fabric of DRECP and the more 10 million acres of public land it would affect. We urge that all desert procurement be consistent with the RACP. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
So I have a question on that, just as clarification. So before we move to any other public comment, so I just sent an email to the clerk of the board with the comments that you sent to me just before the meeting started. I'm sorry, I didn't see those before the meeting started. This is the project that EBCE has a contract with, right? And it's like one part of a much bigger project. And if it were smaller, would not be in violation of the environmental kind of development contract that's happening out there. But because of the size that they're wanting to build it, it would damage protected habitat. Am I thinking of the right project?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I was on there. So if the clerk could please make sure that those comments were distributed to all members of the CAC, including alternates, and posted on the website, it would be appreciated. Are there other public comments? I see, Cynthia, that your hand is raised. I'm sure you have a comment for her, but we have to be a little bit careful about how we handle an unagendized item.
There are other hands held. Tom Kelly.
Okay, great. Tom, will recognize you for 3 minutes.
Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I have to give him speaking rights. Tom?
I'm glad I have some speaking rights, Lori. Thank you. Last month, I called in to alert you to the fact that EBCE's emissions intensity for Bright Choice in 2020 was 590 pounds CO2 per metric ton. In 2019, it was about 100 pounds. In 2018, the EBCE Board of Directors approved a benchmark of 142 pounds of CO2 per metric ton. So, and also the staff was required to come back annually with any change in that benchmark. So here we are, 590 pounds, one of the worst emissions intensities in the entire state of California. In fact, it exceeds PG&E's basic emissions factor by 3.5%, and is, as you can calculate, about 6 times what it was last year. So my question is really, what did the CAC do in response to that comment, and what are EBCE's plans for bringing the emissions intensity of Bright Choice down to the board-approved level? Second thing I wanted to mention is that LA County, Redondo Beach, and Beverly Hills just voted last week to opt up all customers in their jurisdictions to 100% renewable default product. That brings the number of cities and counties in California to 27 who've opted up their electric accounts. And I'm not talking about municipal accounts, but I'm talking about residential and commercial accounts to 100% renewable. To the credit of some cities in East Bay Community Energy's jurisdiction, some cities here have also done that as well. On that topic of opting up, the issue about equity always comes up. And in EBCE territory, all the cities that have opted up to 100% have left the Care Farah customers behind, saddling them with this dirty power associated with Bright Choice. The Clean Power Alliance in LA, which most of these jurisdictions fall into, have a program that allows Care Farah customers to be included in that opt-out at the same price that they would pay for Southern California Energy electricity. And in effect, all the members of participating jurisdictions help to subsidize the cost, allowing low-income customers to also share in the benefits of that 100% renewable. It's time for us to do it. I'd like to get this on the board agenda for discussion, and I hope the CAC will help me push that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Igor, I see your hand is raised. You can, for 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, board members, and congratulations to all of you who were appointed tonight, and also to the alternates. Hi, Lisa, great to see you here, and great to see everyone else. I am speaking on behalf of the California Safe California Solar Coalition today, on behalf of the 600 plus organizations and elected officials that have signed off signed on to the simple edict that we as a state need to be doing everything we possibly can to make local solar as affordable and accessible as possible, and not listen to what the utilities would want us to do. We want to thank you for your support of the letter on the net energy metering 3.0 proceeding that was sent. Unfortunately, as we had expected, the proposed decision, which came out today, is bad. It proposes 3 things. Under this proposal, it would, 1, impose the highest solar penalty fee in the US. If you put solar panels on your rooftop, you will be charged on average $57 a month. PG&E, we're in PG&E territory. Thank goodness for them. They're only asking for $48 a month. Second, the proposal includes a massive cut to the credit solar users currently receive for the extra energy that they produce for the community. So this really disadvantages any proposals that we all would support around local and community solar. And finally, these proposed changes will be retroactive on existing solar users. So the current 20 years protection for solar users on NEM1 and NEM2 customers will be reduced to 15 years. There's a lot of window dressing in this proposal. As we expected, the CPUC included items intended to make it seem like they are helping more working class folks afford solar. For example, they exempt some low-income folks from the solar penalty fee and also offer a temporary subsidy for 10 years. But these items are window dressing. The so-called CPUC incentive would only partially offset these other changes, making it on the whole worse for working class communities than the status quo. We're going to continue to fight for the ability of everyone, but especially working class communities, to have access to solar and storage. I'd like to invite you to call into this Thursday's 10 a.m. CPUC meeting. I can post info in the chat and speak on this issue. This might be the last opportunity to do so before the final proposal comes out sometime in January. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Igor. Always appreciate when you're here. And very disappointing news. Great, okay. Thank you. I see one more member of the public with their hand raised, which is Jessica Tovar.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Jessica Tovar with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance.
Jessica, you came muted somehow.
Let me see if I did that. I was putting everybody else at, oh, no.
Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
The button had disappeared. Okay. Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I wanted to speak to the local development business plan and how that came to be. We established the East Bay Clean Power Alliance back in 2014 in Alameda County-wide alliance. And part of the vision of our local community choice program was to advocate for a community choice program that is committed to investing in local clean energy development in programs, projects, and an investment fund. And back then, we advocated to the Board of Supervisors, and they allocated $500,000 to do this study. And just to be clear, the advocates who advocated for the local development business plan were from various stakeholders. So it was the Alameda Labor Council, as well as the East Bay Clean Power Alliance in unity with labor, members of the faith community, social justice, environmental justice, and the housing justice sector as well, who advocated for the local development business plan, because we wanted a community choice program that makes investments in community benefits, right? So the local development business plan is made up of different programs. So one is demand response, and there's energy efficiency, building and transportation electrification, a collaborative procurement program. And then there's other programs like that have not been instituted, like municipal feed-in tariff, community shared solar pilot, community net energy metering, and so much more, including a community investment fund, of which I will talk more later in the agenda, as I see the item is agendized. But what that is community innovation grants. And that's an opportunity pretty much for, funding innovation in the community that comes from our local nonprofits in the East Bay and Tracy area. So I want folks to get familiar with the local development business plan, because a lot of what was spoken by other people today, such as the 100% remote utility scale solar, disrupts ecosystems and communities in the desert. It doesn't create jobs and local benefits. Obviously, our community does not want nuclear energy. What we need is local clean energy investments. Solar, battery storage, wind, and all these programs would create more benefits and economic opportunities for the East Bay. So again, I wanted to highlight some of that history because it really comes from the ground up. My time is almost over, so I'll say clean power to the people. Thank you for hearing me out tonight.
Thank you, Jessica. It looks like I'm looking away. It's just because I'm taking notes here and the monitor is there. So I'm not looking, it's just where the camera is versus where the typing is. All right. All right, so I do see Member Pacheco's hand raised. Do you have a question on one of the public comments?
Well, no, I don't have a question. Well, I guess, yes, I do have a question. So what Joan Taylor was talking about, is that something that we could discuss under public procurement? I'm thinking it might be, because I actually do want to.
It is something that we could discuss under the procurement item. We would not be able to discuss it under public comment because it is not agendized. But because it is in direct relationship to an agendized, a publicly noticed and agendized item, we could discuss it under that item.
Well, I would invite Joan to speak again under that item, and I know that I would like to discuss what she brought up under that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we just have to be really careful not to discuss things that aren't publicly noticed. And That's that. So thank you for those comments. They're all informed and engaged, and we are grateful for you being here. I'll see how we can follow up on those things. So thank you. We will now move to the next item, which is the administrative procurement and policy item. This is an action item. And which member of our staff is giving us a presentation on this?
That'll be me. Last month I was stepping in. Now I'm grateful we have Lori to clerk, but Vanessa Gerber, I'm presenting this item. It looks like it is loading, at least for me, on the screen share. So this item, thank you, Lori, will be coming to the board this Wednesday. And I am presenting on this item as I am the staff lead for our supplier diversity program. Brief context, the supplier diversity program has been underway at the state level for all the utilities regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission since the mid-'80s. As of last year, CCAs are now have a reporting requirement and a program requirement. And so we've built out a supplier diversity program, and it's through that we are bringing this proposed amendment to the administrative procurement policy. And so context on the administrative procurement policy, that is our set of requirements and processes for different types of procurement. The one that the category of procurement that this directly relates to is general contractual services, that is goods and non-professional services. The policy also discusses professional services. Those are more of our kind of niche consulting services, as well as our power procurement. So this is specifically within the section regarding our general contractual services. And when we put out a solicitation for those services, that is required by the policy for anything where the contract would be over $100,000 per year. So sometimes we do put out solicitations for smaller dollars. The policy requires only over 100K. We have two existing preferences. That is for businesses within our service territory, as Jessica Tovar was just talking about, investing in our local community. Of course, that is a value of EBCE, as well as for union labor. What this amended version of the policy proposes we also introduce is a preference be included for disabled veteran business enterprises, or as the CPUC kind of shorthands that in the supplier diversity program, BVBEs, as well as for businesses located within disadvantaged communities. That is something that, that's another set of communities that we can display a preference for and support the businesses within those communities across California. Say, for example, it was an East Bay Community Energy located business also in a disadvantaged community. They would receive both the 5% bonus for the local and 2.5% for also being located in a disadvantaged community. So these are the two new preferences that we are requesting the board adopt to be included in our administrative procurement policy. And the attachments that you can go through, I think probably the most useful is actually the red line. You can actually just see, we don't necessarily need to scroll many pages down. I think it's probably page 15 or something like that, but that's where it actually calls out the specific language that has changed. So I will pause and happy to ask any questions you might have.
Thank you. Also, thank you for keeping that concise. It's already 6:46, which is pretty well. I see Jessica's hand raised. Before we go to that, were there any comments submitted on this item?
I don't see any comments from attendees. Jessica lowered her hand.
Okay, so if there were no public comments submitted on this item and no members of the public with their hand raised, we will then go to questions or comment from members of this body. Ernie, I see your hands up.
Thank you. Staff probably didn't come prepared for this question, but this question is spurred from Joan Taylor's bringing up the issue with the intercept contract and it not following the DRECP. Does any staff who are on this call know at what stage we are with that particular intercept project? And this does fall under procurement. I'll get there.
I can comment on it. That contract is something that we took to the board. I'm just estimating now 4 or 5 months ago. It was approved and we have signed a PPA associated with that project.
Thank you, Howard. I'll say so. Under the DRECP, there have been 3 projects that have gone through that process. 2 clearway projects and an intercept project. We have contracts with both those providers. I think we're sending a bad message, and this may be the first that we're hearing about it. It's the first that I'm hearing about it today. When we procure from providers who are not following minimal environmental or community or labor conditions, Clearway managed to do 2 projects under the DRECP, intercept at another location which doesn't fall under the DRECP. They had an environmentally sound project which we approved. I don't know if Joan is available to speak more on this, but I would like to know more about how this project failed the DRECP, and I would like a message sent from our agency that we are not going to accept projects that don't meet minimal environmental standards. And I'm thinking about making a resolution of the board, but I don't know if staff or if Joan can speak to any more detail on this.
Just as a point of clarification, the item before us at this moment is that of adding preference points for disabled veteran-owned businesses and businesses in or owned by members of disadvantaged communities, if I understand that correctly, Vanessa. Is this about that preference point? And if not, let's move it to its appropriate item. I am with you all the way, but let's put the discussion.
This is not disabled veteran preference. It is about procurement, though. That's why I was asking earlier whether or not that's something we can discuss.
So yeah, we'll move that into the procurement piece. Let me just make sure I'm not making this up.
I don't think there is a procurement piece separate from what Vanessa has.
Oh,
just to be candid. So
then,
while this is clearly an important topic to probably discuss, I'm not sure that it actually would fall under this agenda item, unfortunately.
But it is about our procurement policy.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. I'm sorry. That's yes. I would like to get comments and questions first on the disabled preference and the disadvantaged community preference. And we do need to circle back to this. Let me go through kind of the requirements of how we do things and see if we can do that right now. But first, let's do the comments on the actual proposal in front of us. Although further discussion on our administrative procurement policy is absolutely warranted under this item. So let me think about that for just half a second, Ernie. We'll go to Lisa and then we'll circle back.
Great, thanks everybody. And thanks Vanessa for the presentation and bringing this item. First of all, I just really applaud the intention of the change and think this is a really reasonable way to try and prioritize some funding in alignment with EBC values and other priorities. I'm mostly curious if staff considered adjusting the language from located in disadvantaged communities to located in and benefiting disadvantaged communities. I know it sounds like a very cosmetic difference, but actually it has pretty large impacts on how contracts and services could be assessed and evaluated with an equity lens. If folks haven't considered it, I urge folks to consider it, and I'm happy to offer more resources. For general awareness, in case folks aren't already aware, this is an ongoing point that environmental justice organizations have surfaced throughout the life of SB 535 and different applications of the Cal Envirus Green Disadvantaged Communities designation through Cal EPA, especially for public entities like EBCE that have to abide by Prop 209, right? And just as we know, I think as members of EBCE in this territory, given the historic and ongoing impacts of gentrification and displacement, we know that having a physical office in what is considered a disadvantaged community does not necessarily mean that that entity is actually delivering benefits to that local community. So that's, I think, just in a thesis statement, that's the point. I can provide a couple materials in case it's helpful for folks that are thinking this through. One, there's a letter from public advocates, the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, Coalition for Clean Air and Greenlining, that really delineates why this addition of thinking about benefits is also really important in addition to location. A second piece is this distinction in energy was actually successfully adopted in the passage of AB 523, which for the EPIC program talks about both, located in and benefiting disadvantaged communities. So that might be a reference material to consider as well. And then the third piece that just might be helpful for this item or for ongoing considerations around procurement. The California Environmental Justice Alliance, CEJA, they released a CCA report that's a really, really wonderful resource of suggestions that they did statewide level through concerted work with their member organizations across the state. And two of their questions that they recommend are really relevant here. One, does the CCA evaluate job benefits, local distributed energy development, and environmental benefits in their procurement process? Two, does the CCA have a method for prioritizing procurement that provides jobs and economic development opportunities, local distributed energy resources, air quality, low-income optimization, and protections for DACs during emergencies? So anyways, offering that just as a suite of potential resources if folks haven't already considered it. If you already have and it's out of scope, would love to hear a little bit of how that process, how you all made that decision. Thanks.
I can Chair, would you like me to respond briefly or
Yes.
wait? Okay. Yeah, I can respond briefly, and Howard, feel free to kind of complement these thoughts. So first of all, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the comments. We kind of have explored how to fully implement this, and I think a top priority, well, two top priorities is actually delivering benefit to our community, and also being very consistent with our processes and operations, also knowing that as a public agency, there can be a lot of scrutiny on the consistency of how we do things, particularly in our solicitations. Determining whether a business is located in a DAC is very cut and dry. Determining the benefit accrued to, we even considered hiring from. Those are types of things that we don't want potential vendors to kind of game the system and claim more benefit than is actually being realized. So we landed on the location in the DAC as something that we are very confident that we can consistently verify, knowing that it is maybe the tip of the iceberg, but something that we feel consistent, confident in our ability to execute operationally. I don't know if Howard, if you have any other anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good summary. I think the only other thing I would add is because this is a matter of policy, we needed to make it as objective as possible, whereas benefits accruing to a DAC is a very difficult thing to measure. Part of the challenges obviously you're flagging are just, are that very fact. It's actually difficult to measure those things. So I think as an agency, we certainly want to do those things. But if you're putting it into a procurement policy that you can't objectively measure, then we put ourselves under risk of being challenged in the process. And so that's why we limit it to based. That doesn't mean that we would ignore benefits to DACs. in consideration of all of our procurements, but by policy, we needed to make it more objective.
Just, Lisa, if it's okay if I jump in here, we have these qualifiers that we use in the county currently. There's things like level of employment of local hire. That's a filter that we currently have to determine local benefits. We have level of Section 3 qualifying employees. We have Section 3 qualifying business entities. We have payment supports to small and local businesses. We have SLEB filters. We have LBE filters. We have SBE filters, WBE filters, MBE filters. Like we have an entire body of established metrics that we currently utilize in the county of our service territory. I don't believe this is beyond the scope. They are objective things that currently exist. I would be happy to work with Lisa and get you some of those materials that are viewed by county council to be objective and are currently utilized in our service territory.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be helpful. If you want to send that over, that'd be great.
Great. Lisa, follow up with you afterwards on this. Cool. Cynthia?
Yes, I support the addition of these two adders. However, I'm curious if you could put that chart back up. Why is there a difference? There's a slight difference between some of the adders versus the others. It's not much, but I want to know what the rationale is that it's not equal. I mean,
Are you referring to the 5% versus 2.5%?
well,
what do you mean?
yeah, and I guess, yeah, and what is this to the right of it? This 1.6 and 1.7.
Those are just the policy reasons that were.
Okay, yeah, okay, so just yes. So maybe yes. Yeah, maybe you can go over, yeah, what, the first one, that's 5% because that's in our EBC territory area. Is that what that means, please?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So then the others we are giving equal. The others are equal. Okay, that's fine.
If that covered it, Cynthia, then Mary.
Yep.
Hi. Thank you. I had two questions for you, Vanessa. One, I think you might have answered, but I didn't see it actually in the procurement policy, so I might have missed it. The first one is around the DAC designation. Are you counting in terms of a disadvantaged community when their percentage is in the top 30% of all of the communities that are listed in the Excel file? And then the second one is whether or not these bonuses can be layered. So for example, you can get the 5% and the disabled vet, and in the disadvantaged communities to roll up to perhaps a 10% bonus.
Yeah, great question. So the language is not specific for the percentile disadvantaged community. It's just based on the designation in the Calendario screen tool. And the second question is, yes, it can be additive. So it can be up to 12.5% or 12.5 points out of 100 point scoring system of bonus. So that would be the max if it was a local disabled veteran-owned business located in a DAC utilizing union labor. They would get all of those 12.5 points fullest percentage.
Okay, and I guess for me, I think of the tool as the file that came out with every single location in Alameda County, some of which are in the 10% DAC type of percentile, so they're not very high in terms of the problems they have. And I thought in other areas, like energy efficiency, they're pulling DAC is considered if you are in the top 30%. So that's, it's not clear to me. I mean, it can't be everybody that's in that tool because that's 1.6 million people. It's more limited than that is my understanding. And so I was trying to determine if EBCE is relaxing some of that or is going to look at people in the top 10% of that tool.
That's an important clarification. We have been, we've kind of modeled this off of a similar type of policy after that MCE has, at least for their power procurement, in which they did not make a distinction. I do recognize your point that, in other EBCE policies and programs, we do make a distinction. So perhaps that's something for us to discuss and see if we should be more explicit. Is that what the kind of the question and recommendation is?
Yeah, because, top 30% covers, because these are not businesses, these are just people. It's census count, it's not even households. But the number is about 14% of Alameda residents live in the top 30% of DAC. And so my question is that the group that this policy is going to cover? Or is the group going to be expanded or limited in some way based upon their DAC census number, draft CES, in 4.0, it's 4.0 versus 3.0. I think they're slightly different in terms of that tool. And so I don't know exactly which one you're using, but I know it can adjust who the policy is affecting. So that's why I'm trying to figure out if we know.
By matter of policy, we're not differentiating within the DAC. I don't know if what you're asking about is more about different versions of the coronavirus screening. No, you're just talking about
the tool has everybody, just about everybody that lives in the county. The tool has everybody. So at some point you have to say, we're going to go after the people in a certain percentile range that are the highest. You're not going to go after the people in the 1 to the 5th percentile, I don't think, because they have the least amount of issues with pollution or health. So that was my question.
Okay, I may, and it sounds like maybe Lisa, who has some more information that she wants to share on this, maybe I'll defer to her first, and then I can see if I can clarify further.
Perfect, thanks, Hal. Oh, go ahead.
Just as a note, it's already 7:05 and we have 2 pretty substantive agenda items left. And another component to this one that we need to get to. So go for it, Lisa.
Sure. So if it's helpful, I can maybe try and knit some pieces together. So I think everyone's partially right. So yes, Cal Screen, right? Comprehensive mapping tool, environmental justice, overlaying pollution burden with different socioeconomic information at the census tract level. And then Cal Screen as a tool, Mary's right, it includes every census tract that they have data for in the state. Cal EPA on top of the updates. So every time the tool is updated based on different metrics and data updates, Cal EPA on top of that sets the actual threshold for what is the formal designation of disadvantaged communities based on that screening tool. Where it gets a little complicated is, you're right, they have updated it periodically, again, as they add more indicators, get better data. They're in the process of updating it right now. So I was like frantically looking to try and be helpful. I know that they are in the process. They had the draft for the 4.0 version, and they have released their preliminary designations through public workshops. The final decision for how they're going to determine what counts as a disadvantaged community through the updated tool is coming any day. They said mid-December. So if helpful, I can drop in the chat the slide deck that's publicly available of what Cal EPA has proposed, but we don't know the final designation yet. So if that helps, that's at least some info.
That's awesome. And was that why your hand was up, was to provide that information? You're the best. Ed?
Thank you. I just want to quickly ask a clarification, as I understand that we are looking to provide some, let me clarify on the agenda, the two items to support disabled veteran business enterprises and disadvantaged communities. Understood. And I just want to understand further, there's no way to do targeted support of Black-owned businesses or point preferences. And if so, could there? If not, will we need to do a disparity analysis? So again, are we able to target more support to Black-owned businesses, not just in certain areas and in support of veterans, but will we have to go through a disparity analysis to really move that forward? Or is that something we can't do because of the Go 156 or something like that that was mentioned earlier?
So just to provide
Separate
clarification
letters
on
and,
that, we're not able, you're not able to do preference based on race in California. What can happen and does happen is reporting on attainment, like how well are we supporting minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, but you can't provide a preference for it. One of the things that happens when you do track and report regularly on like how well we are successfully reaching out to those businesses is it gives the agency itself an indicator of if policies need to be adjusted so that our outreach can change so that we have greater penetration into some of those businesses that we would like to see participating at a level equivalent to their representative population, but we're not allowed to do that. Is that right, Vanessa? Sorry to jump in.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And Prop 209, which Lisa had mentioned, that is the California constitutional policy that prohibits that. If you do want to look just in, for the sake of time, look at what we are doing relative to our supplier diversity program. There is now a web page on our website. If you go into our menu and do doing business with EBCE, it'll be under that page or just ebce.org/supplier-diversity. You can also see a report which kind of outlines our outreach to ethnic chambers of commerce, affinity groups, and things like that, which is our outreach to further our solicitations. The one group that is not prohibited for preference under the Go 156, the supplier diversity program, is disabled veteran business entities. So that's why that is included here. And then just to close the loop, I think, Lisa, I appreciate the clarification there. I think that was very helpful. The way that the language is written in the proposed policy says EBCE desires to support businesses located in disadvantaged communities as identified by the Cal EPA Cal Enviro Screen tool, and that will be of the time when the solicitation is issued. So understand that right now, 4.0 is about to come out. Say we put out a solicitation today, 4.0 is not fully baked in public. We would be going off of 3.0 based on the Cal EPA designation of a DAC. And so if the business is in a disadvantaged community census tract as per 3.0 Cal Enviro Screen, they would get this 2.5% funding.
Thank you for that information. Just want to make sure that based on my experience as a former council member in City of San Leandro and talking to my city attorney, it was important to gather data to be able to do a disparity analysis, at least start measuring it. So if we wanted and saw there was a bias or some kind of lack of representation, that we can change from our procurement policies. That's what I understand. Maybe different here, but I understand because of the Prop 209 that there might be challenges, but the disparity analysis would help enact a bias and then be able to move that forward. So something that maybe a council can look at in the future for the board, but if not, appreciate the context and support here for understanding it further, but very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. It's really nice to have you on this side of the table.
Pleasure.
All right, Ernie, we're going to go to you, and then I'll be looking for, and then I have a couple more comments and then looking for a motion. So go forward, Ernie.
Well, I was actually going to make a motion. I'm listening to this important conversation, sophisticated conversation, while also trying to Google up some EBCE documents. But I was going to make a motion to accept, but I actually would look to you and Lisa. If I followed your comments correctly, this looks like good policy, though we might be able to refine it better. But I was considering making a motion to support.
Awesome. Would you accept a friendly amendment of the Community Advisory Committee moves to support staff's recommendation of these two adders, however they're properly phrased, with the added recommendation that for businesses in disadvantaged communities, Lisa, help me with wording here, that something about that we utilize an additional level of scrutiny. Maybe you can come up with the words. My concern is that a lot of businesses are displacing businesses in disadvantaged communities, right? We have these target zones that have been renamed economic development zones and economic opportunity zones. So what we have is individuals and businesses who are actively displacing current residents and small businesses in disadvantaged communities. And we do not want to we don't want the undesirable outcome of an action be to incentivize that behavior. So if a business moves into a community, having it been there for 6 months, for example, is one of the things. Having local employees, all of those things are screens that you can put on that aren't race-based or gender-based or any of those things, that are tools that are acceptable. So I would say I would like to see us support this with the addition of adding a couple pretty easy filters. Like, these are forms that we ask every contractor who does business with the county to fill out. So it's not a surprise. It's not an extra level of burden. It's objective. It's easy to verify. If I had a shorter way to say that would be great.
We don't want our procurement policy to be another tool of gentrification. Yes, I would accept a friendly amendment if you guys can figure out language.
Great. This is Vice Chair Mutzenberg. I'm thinking of how to shorten that. So I'm thinking kind of like how Chair Eldred said, additional scrutiny. Maybe we can say approve staff recommendation with added caveat for businesses in DACs that there be additional security or scrutiny filters that help benefit that help benefit said DACs.
Help
or that benefit.
Determine community benefit or something like that.
Or yeah, we can say scrutinies that benefit communities, but I think we can leave it just for this approval.
Lisa, your original wording was "and benefit," located in and benefit, or and provide community benefits. Is that correct? Is that the language you were going for?
Yes, great question. Scrolling through my own notes, apologies.
So that's what I had written down in my notes, but when you had initially said it, located in and benefiting. So that's why I'm thinking in the language of this resolution or this motion that we just say scrutiny that benefits those communities.
Ernie, is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I would happily accept that.
Is there a second?
I'll second Jim Lutz.
Great. We have a motion by Member Pacheco, a second by Member Lutz. Can you please call a roll call vote?
Member Sutter?
Yes.
Member Pacheco?
Yes.
Member Liu?
Yes.
Member Landry,
Yes.
member Moltzen, it's Molzenberger.
Mutzenberg and I.
I will get these names right. Member Swamithan. Are they not here? Okay, member Laskinman.
Yeah. Yes.
Member Hernandez
Yes, thank you.
and member Lutz.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
We aren't done voting yet, actually.
I'm sorry, I did not call you, Anna.
Anna Olivia is my first name, and I believe we also have member who's voting tonight.
And who is the member I missed?
Lisa who?
Wait, is it Lisa?
Yes, correct. Also, yes.
Also, yes, that's 9. And
So a yes.
Chair Aldridge?
Eldred, and yes.
Aldridge, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you for jumping in. There's a lot of us.
So that would be 10-0.
Great. Motion passes unanimously. And we're going to go back. Ernie, did you sounded like you wanted to make a motion on what was brought forth, which is legitimately part of the procurement dialogue. It is 7:18. We have 2 really substantive agenda items in front of us, and I have 2 days left. I'm on a pretty heavy deadline, so we're going to try and wrap this just as close to 8 o'clock as we can. Did you have a comment or motion you wanted to make?
Yes, understood. I'll be as quick as I can, but I will say a statement or two. So one of the things I was Googling up was DRECP. It looks like the agency, at least in its electronic records, hasn't discussed DRECP since October of 2017. I suspect that the issues that are being brought forward by the public today, Joan, were not part of any agency discussion, not through any fault of agency staff or methods, but it looks like it didn't make it into the system. I think our procurement policy is the single greatest tool we as an agency have to make change. That's been my thought on it since I've been organizing for this since 2007. It's not our only tool, but it's the greatest one. And my understanding is I'm not a desert wildlands expert, but I know that millions of acres have been opened up for a form of fast permitting for renewable energy projects. And that's good if done right, considering addressing the climate crisis, if done right. What was brought to us today sounds like that the core environmental filter for California desert land projects, the DRECP, a project we entered into doesn't meet that. Sending a procurement signal that it's okay to not meet that minimal wildland standards, I think is serious abrogation of this agency's, one of this agency's core philosophies. Under the local, the LDBP, we have environmental factors as a weighing factor, and I wasn't able to Google up the general environmental factors for our general procurement. I'm not good at listening to sophisticated arguments and Googling and reading documents at the same time. We built into this agency our core values, and one of our core values is that we consider environmental issues. And it sounds like we may have unwittingly entered into a contract that the second or third out of what will be dozens, even hundreds of projects doesn't meet minimal standards. That's a big deal, I think. So I would like for us to, it sounds like we already signed the contract, but I'd like for us to look into it and investigate whether or not the claims that are being made, which seem valid, that it doesn't make that this project doesn't meet minimal environmental standards, number one. And two, if we find that we look into whether or not we can vacate that project or work with the project proponent on amending that project to make it meet minimal environmental standards. So that's my thought. I'm willing to make a motion. I don't know if I'll step back and see if anyone has any comments before I make my motion.
I think that what we definitely should agendize it. It'll go to the board on Wednesday. Mary, do you have a?
I mean, my preference, I am not prepared to talk about this tonight. I think it's a substantive issue. I don't fully understand DCREP. I see intersect for us is 125 megawatts, not the 500 megawatts that was described. I think more discussion needs to happen, and I'm not prepared to vote on this tonight. So if we bring it forward, I'm going to be a no, only because I think it just needs more discussion. I think it needs to be agendized and more thoroughly brought out, and we could have input from staff.
Okay. I would ask we can agendize it for our next meeting. I would also ask that staff send something out about this topic. I would be disturbed if we had signed a contract for a project that couldn't deliver what we had signed them for unless they were in violation of an existing land use law. That would be very bizarre to me. Like I have more faith in our staff than that. Like I'm sure there's like, I'm hoping to see where we are on this. It seems like our staff would be able to say, no, we didn't sign a contract that can't deliver unless they're in violation of a law. Like that sounds bonkers to me. So we will be requesting information come back to us on this item. It will be agendized, and I'll definitely bring it up at the board meeting on Wednesday as well. I mean, I'm not opposed to you making a motion about saying our procurement policy should not be environmentally detrimental, especially in violation of land use laws. Seems like a basic.
Yeah, no, I see no need to make like a generic, we like puppies motion. So yes, if we can put this as an agendized item on the next CAC meeting, and if those that are, I looked at the letter that was sent in on this, and it's by the Sierra Club and like 5 other legitimate groups and their lawyers. If we can have staff take a look at the claims that are being made, and we can have a presentation by staff, then I guess we can reach out to the proponent, or not the proponents, but those that are claiming that this project doesn't meet the DRECB standards.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Joan. I don't know if you're still on or not, but really appreciate you being here, and you are still on. So thank you. I'll make sure to follow up with you on this item as well. Okay, so sadly, we have a short period of time to do a lot of stuff. The Community Innovation Grants update is next. We will be getting a presentation from staff, and we'll ask that presentation, I don't want to lose anything, but
you want to brief?
I do. I would like that.
All right,
thanks,
I can make it brief. And Olivia, Chair Eldred, I will make it brief. Let's see.
Again, I don't want to lose anything. It's an important topic, and
Sure.
It's been requested by the public repeatedly.
Great. All right. So I will start in. If we go to the first slide, please, Lori. So I know there's been some requests to discuss the community innovation grants in reference to this fiscal year. And I wanted to just kind of, for folks who have recently joined the CAC or who may need a refresher, I did want to just review next slide, please, Lori. Second slide. I wanted to review the budgeting process. So as you probably are aware, EBCE goes through an annual budgeting process, and we run on the fiscal year. So our fiscal year runs from July 1st to the end of June. And so we go through our budget development process between kind of April and June, with the board approving our budget in the June meeting. And it's certainly at the board's discretion to make updates or changes to the budget during the year. We do give quarterly updates and a mid-year update to the budget on our actuals. And so the board can make adjustments if they so desire. And with respect to community innovation grants specifically, the FY20 budget, which included half of calendar year 2019 and the first half of 2020, did include funding for community innovation grants, and I will review those presently. And I wanted to note that this year's budget, fiscal year 22, which includes the second half of 2021 and into the first half of 22, did not include community innovation grants. So there hasn't not been community innovation grants in this year's budget, at least the budget that was approved by the board in June. Next slide, please. So the fiscal year 2020 community innovation grants, we issued that in 2019, soon after receiving approval. And that ended up being 6 grants of $40,000 per community-based organization. And the grantees are listed there on the right. In general, projects kind of ran the gamut. There were a few local solar projects that different organizations were either implementing or planning for. So the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project, People Power Solar Co-op, and Revolve were all involved in local solar projects or planning for local solar projects. We also funded a workforce development program and plan from Rising Sun Center for Opportunity. We did some low-income energy efficiency through Rising Sun as well. And Community Impact Lab did kind of community education around climate and energy usage. And then Ecology Action did some work on how to charge EVs in multi-unit dwellings. So those were the grants that were issued in that cycle, and there's more information on the URL on the bottom. Going into other grants that we have issued, so we also issued some workforce development grants. This was from funding that we received from some of the utility scale project development contracts that we've signed. So we issued 3 workforce development grants for $33,000 apiece to these 3 organizations: Cypress Mandela, Grid Alternatives, and the Tri-Valley Career Center. And in the interim, we've also been really working with Cypress and Grid Alternatives to tie in those grants and the training that those organizations are providing straight to our Resilient Home program with Sunrun. And so we've been collaborating with those workforce development organizations to make sure that their trainings can really kind of be a pipeline for Sunrun. So the trainings really get people ready for hiring. And then Sunrun is now kind of interviewing candidates who are graduating from those programs, because the training is certainly really important, but then having like a hiring organization who is working to pick people directly from those programs is another necessity to creating a path to employment. So those are some workforce development grants that we've been managing. Next slide, please. So we also responded to COVID-19 and in response to the challenges that a shutdown immediately provided to our communities, and certainly our more vulnerable communities. We issued about $2.2 million in grants. About half of that was immediately put through our local city municipal partners and municipal agencies who we understood had a lot of connections into the community, and we felt like their distribution channels were solid and their processes were solid. So about half of that was immediately given to our cities to distribute. And then we distributed grants to a variety of organizations across the spectrum, from food aid and food bank organizations, local CBOs, and medical and healthcare organizations. And then that was kind of grants into the community. And then in response to COVID-19, we also did some other things kind of to make sure that customers were had the most flexibility to paying their bills and not getting disconnected. So those were some grants that we issued in response to COVID-19. And then lastly, what we did put into this year's budget with respect to community grants was our AMP and CARE outreach grants. So this is a brand new grant. The request for proposals was issued last week, I believe, and there's a webinar tomorrow for interested CBOs and organizations that are serving the community. All the information is on the link right there. So that's $150,000 that is being made available for grants up to $30,000 a piece. And this is really focused on AMP, so the Arrearage Management Plan. This is for a CPUC program that forgives debt to customers who have over $500 in arrearage. And we know who those people are. And so we plan to work with CBOs to get as many people who can benefit from that program enrolled in that program. And then we also have other programs we're trying to enroll customers in, including CARE and FARA, our medical baseline program, and providing bill literacy for EBCE billing, which are very difficult to interpret and read, unfortunately, not our bill, but PG&E's bill. So this is the community-based organization grants that we are issuing this year, and it's really through our Connected Communities program and very focused on vulnerable customers who are either behind on their bill or potentially threatened with disconnection when and if PG&E and the PUC lifts the disconnection moratorium, which will happen at some point. We want to make sure that we minimize those disruptions for our most vulnerable customers. So the CAC had requested kind of an overview of grants, wanted to provide that to you all, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We go first to the clerk to ask if there were any comments submitted on this topic.
Not that I had, no, thank you.
All right, I do see that we have a member of the public with their hand raised. Jessica Tovar.
Oh, I lost. I'm sorry. Jessica, can you hear?
Yes, I'm here now. Jessica.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a hard shoes to fill. Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I spoke earlier to a little bit of the background of the local development business plan. And earlier today, we did submit a letter to both the CAC and the board members in regards to the community innovation grant specifically. First, I want to thank JP and the rest of the staff around the other grant programs that were mentioned, debt relief, as well as the workforce development, and also to acknowledge that we are going to be hearing more about the low to moderate income electrification program. But one of the things I wanted to address was the community innovation grants, because they have not been offered since 2019, and the intent of these programs through the local development business program is for them to be ongoing annual programs. These are not one-off projects. You don't do a one project and forget about, continuing the program. And so community innovation grants were very valuable for community organizations to pitch whatever projects that they are working on or exploring. And it's a way for East Bay Community Energy to give back and encourage innovation from the community. So that's very important. It's both a relationship building as well as, building for addressing climate change in a very active way from the ground up. And so, $40,000 to a nonprofit organization is very valuable. The organizations that were mentioned today are all wonderful organizations from our community. And so we would like to see these community innovation grants to continue every year as an investment in the community. Last June, the board did talk about adding an additional $250,000 specifically for community innovation grants. And that was because we advocated to make sure that the program continues, that this offer is available to community organizations every year. It's a fraction of money comparison to the profits that East Bay Community Energy is making. There are different sponsorships for sports teams that come up. There's all these, there's the advocacy, who knows what is going to be needed down the line. East Bay Community Energy has heard us when it comes to debt relief, but I do need the community innovation grants to be reinstated and that opportunity be opened up to other community groups every year. That is my time. Clean power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Seeing no other members of the public with their hand raised, I'll turn to comments or questions from this body. Mary?
Thank you, JP, for the discussion of the variety of things that EBCE has done. I had two questions. One is about the 2019 Community Innovation Grants that you noted. Are the bullet points in terms of what these projects delivered, are those like, I think about it as after the fact, like did the local solar projects that these community groups were expected to bring out, did they come to fruition? Were the opportunities used in the multifamily housing EV? So at some point, how do we know what occurred after the fact, after these? That's one question. Then the second one is, you talked about the budget. If this budget were reinstated or reused, would you have to shuffle something else to kind of deprioritize that, to prioritize these particular grants? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And just before you respond to that, I should have reported back on this item from the board meeting. Part of the report back last month was that in the Community Advisory Committee report, we did bring up that we had requested information on the community innovation grants. There was some discussion among the board members. Member Harris actually pulled up meeting notes and said, yes, our intention was that these be funded. So there was some discussion on the item at the board meeting, which I should have said. Sorry about that. All right, JP,
Thanks,
go for it.
Olivia. And JP, before you answer, Olivia, what is it that you want us to have action on within the CEC? Do you want us to put forward, like whether or not we're supporting having these put in place? What is our action?
So it was requested last month that this item be agendized. I believe that I wanted to make sure we had the ability to bring a resolution or a motion to the board regarding this item. There's been a lot of discussion on it and the need for it. Really grateful to JP that he jumped in and put together a presentation for us. Apologize for the truncated timeframe. But if there is a resolution, which there does not have to be, but if we have a motion or a recommendation to the board, I wanted to at least notice it that we could.
Okay, thank you.
So to quickly answer your questions, Mary. So some of these resulted in projects, and we pushed hard to get a final report from each of the grantees. So that's all posted on that website. So we've tried to put final reports to the extent that we got them. Sometimes there were final reports on projects. Sometimes there ended up being final reports on lessons learned on why projects didn't happen. But these were very outcome focused grants, even though we didn't withhold any money from one of the CBOs if they didn't do exactly what they said they were, because sometimes things don't happen as you expect. And so, but we had monthly or quarterly meetings with recipients, and that kind of gets to your second question. So in this case, like Febby worked with me quite closely. Ed Hernandez was one of our review committees, as well as Jane. But frankly, I had another staff person who I was able to work on this with, and it took a lot. I think we ended up having 2 or 3 grant contract amendments, because some of the projects ended up taking a long time, and it also happened in the middle of COVID. So those types of things happen. So yeah, doing these requires more staff, which I don't have. So there's staffing implications on when you do one thing, then you don't do something else unless you hire more people. So those are all the things that when we put our budget together, we say, do we have enough people to do the work that we're proposing, budgeting for this year? And so some things make it in and some things don't. So that's how we do our budgeting process. And so that's something that we would, that we have to consider, is do we have the people to do this work? One point I just did want to mention. So we've gone back and looked at the records associated with the June board meeting. And although Councilmember Harrison raised community innovation grants as a first point to the additional $250,000 that was allocated to low moderate income electrification, the final resolution that was passed by the board was not to fund additional community innovation grants. It was for staff to come back with a proposal to fund low moderate income electrification efforts. And that's what we've done with our block power proposal, electrification and efficiency proposal, is to come back and say, this is how we want to integrate the additional funds into projects and programs that are underway that we have staff to do. And we want to work with block power to do this deep energy efficiency and electrification targeting, and specifically to low moderate income households and electrification. So I know as I went back and looked at the minutes from the meeting, the minutes said one thing, the board resolution, and I've got a long minute by minute review of every board member and exactly what they said. And the community innovation grants was not specifically requested by the board. So I do want to clarify that. And it's not to say that it has to be one or another, but what we did come to the board with was what they asked, which is we want to do this low moderate income electrification partnership with block power and allocate $250,000 in additional funds to do that. It fits seamlessly within the work that Becky is doing around efficiency and electrification. And so that's why we kind of have the resources to fit that in and do it, because that was the other request from the board, was come back to us with a plan and make sure that you have the staff to implement it. So those are all things that we factor when we kind of bring something to a program to the CAC and the board for review and approval.
All right. Thank you for that, Cynthia.
Yes, thank you. I would like to make a motion to recommend to the EBCE board through staff to include the community innovation grants for 21-22 22 budget. I think we're very close to a mid-year budget review. So I'd like to have the staff consider whether we can start doing it for the remainder of the year. And or if that is not possible, to definitely, well, I won't say definitely, to recommend that we reinstitute or continue the community innovation grants in the 22-23 year budget. And that review in the mid-year would need to include staffing, so that it can be carried out as well. And I think overall, it's my impression that we are doing fairly well financially. So in that mid-year review, I would see has an opportunity to relook at this issue. Thank you.
So just to summarize, what I heard is that you make a motion that we recommend to the board that the community innovation grants be funded either during the mid-year budget review or at the next budget, and that that funding includes allocation of staff to the project. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is very accurate, and I'd be willing to accept a friendly amendment if anyone thinks it could be better. Thank you.
Is there a second to that motion?
Zerni, I would second that.
Okay, great. I have a question. So JP, it's great that you went back and reviewed those minutes. So the minutes said one thing, but the actual resolution said the other, and the summary of the discussion included the concept of community innovation grants.
I'm not sure I understand the last piece there. Sorry.
So sometimes when there's inconsistencies between records, it's important to look at the intent of the body. We have to do that all the time because that happens all the time. So the resolution that was passed did not involve the term community innovation grants. It had something to do with electrification. The meeting minutes had innovation grants, and the discussion had at least discussion around innovation grants, but the thing that was ultimately passed did not. Is that correct?
Yeah, the discussion kind of started with community innovation grants, and then there was a lot of board feedback along the way that said, we don't want to specify exactly what staff does and what the proposal is. We don't know the implications. We don't know how it fits into other bodies of work. And so then there was a lot of feedback to that to say, we don't want to be prescriptive. So please staff come back to us and tell us how you want to spend $250,000 for low moderate income electrification. So there was an arc of the conversation, as I'm sure you're well familiar with. And so at the beginning of the arc was a mention of community innovation grants. As it went through the conversation, there was a lot of, we want staff to come back to us with a recommendation, and let's not be prescriptive. So I'm not sure how that quite answers your question, but yeah.
That was a perfect answer. And if I remember the discussion, it also involved us needing to have some reserves to get a bond rating, which we just got. Is that correct? We just got a fancy bond rating?
That's a separate conversation, but yes, we did get credit rating.
Credit rating. That's excellent. Okay. Just because that was on Cynthia's point of how we're doing financially, if we've been able to hit those reserves, that's great. All right. So if there is not further discussion on this, it's 7:51. I'd like to call a vote. This would be to recommend to the board that we fund the community innovation grants. They are a really important part, just as a member here, not as the chair. they're a really important part of our outreach and community building with our community. They were a pretty central part of a lot of the discussions around the local development business plan, and a pretty significant way that we were different from PG&E. And one of the ways that our community actually sees us at their doorstep, which I think is important. The idea of working with these community-based organizations is that they already have relationships and they're already trusted. And so as there are fluctuations or differences in what happens over time, it helps build our relationship of trust with them. And so I'm in strong support of this. And oh, JP, is your hit? You go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say, so we are doing that this year through our community grants for CBOs to do AMP and CARE and FARA outreach. So we are working with community-based organizations who have, direct contact and relationships and credibility in the community to do outreach for programs. It is not the community innovation grant as described by the local development business plan 5 years ago. It's a different way of interacting with community-based organizations who are deep in their community to get customers enrolled in programs that are critical for customers. So I just like the local development business plan, the way that programs are implemented are going to evolve over time. So I just want to say we are working with community-based organizations this year in a very innovative way, which is let's get people enrolled in these programs. So I just want to make sure that folks see that we are actually doing a lot of work with community-based organizations. And so I don't want the CAC to think that we're not doing that work, because we are. It's just in a different way.
And apologies that I'm trying to go fast and didn't take the time to really acknowledge how important and solid that work is. I can be in support of both programs. I am in support of both programs. I love what you're doing and how you're doing it. Like, I have a lot of respect, just deep, deep respect. We have a motion on the table. I'd like to call the question. It's 7:54. And we have a really big topic next. So that we maybe won't get to. So if you can do a roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Member Sutter?
I'm going to vote no on the resolution, and not that I don't, for all the reasons that Olivia said, but I just don't feel like, I feel like staff is doing a fair amount, and that the budget that is put aside is working with the populations and the CBOs.
Member Pacheco?
Aye.
Member Liu?
Yes.
Member Landry?
Yes.
Member Hugh?
Yes.
Member Mutzenberg?
Oh, you're getting closer, Mutzenberg, but yes.
Mutzenberg.
I vote yes.
I'll get it sooner or later. Member Lashman?
Yes.
Lakshman?
Yes.
Member Hernandez?
Yes.
Member Letts?
Yes.
And Chair Eldridge?
Eldred, yes.
Eldridge.
Great.
It passes 9-1. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick poll. The next item on our agenda, did not realize how long that would take y'all. The next item on our agenda is an update on the transition and new defaults to Renewable 100 in certain cities. Right now, we have two big things that are happening, in that we are phasing out our Brilliant 100 choice. So customers are about to get a notice that they are coming off of this one product and being transferred to another one. And then 2 months later, they're going to get transferred to another one. I feel like this is an important thing for us to talk about. It's going to the board on Wednesday. But if we cannot maintain quorum, then we can't maintain quorum. This is an informational item, so staff could still present on it, but I would just like y'all to use your raise hand function if you are able to stay on for a few more minutes to get to hear this topic.
And in the interim, this is Vanessa, just Lori, if you can move Alex to Giorgio from the attendees to panelists. He is a staff member who will be presenting on this item.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so I do see that enough folks can stay, so thank you very much for that. And thank you, JP, for that presentation. It's really good, and I really love what you're doing a lot. I assume Alex will be presenting on this item.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. I'm not able to get my camera on for some reason, but that's all right. Hello, Chair Eldred, members of the committee. It's great to be with you. I'll try to go through this as fast as I can, given the late hour. So, yes, there are big service transitions coming. We're going to talk primarily about those that are coming in January. So right now, there are these 4 cities and then another 2 that are going to be transitioning to Renewable 100 as their default service for either all or some of their electric accounts, the citywide electric accounts. So the cities that you don't see here, which are also included in these transitions, are the cities of Berkeley and San Leandro. Their city councils have voted to default to Renewable 100 as well, and our board has approved it, but those will be occurring in March. So Albany, Dublin, Hayward, and Pleasanton, they will all be transitioning in January. And one wrinkle I want to point out there, or one distinction I'd like to point out, is that for Albany, Hayward, and Pleasanton, this is all going to be a transition from Brilliant 100 as the current default, or as the initial default, and to Renewable 100, whereas the city of Dublin still has Bright Choice as the default, and the city of Dublin is only going to be transitioning residential customers in January, along with those other cities. So the city of Dublin, the city council, has yet to make a determination on whether or not commercial customers will also default to Renewable 100 at some later date in the future. The soonest that could happen would be in October of next year, so it's not imminent. Unless there are any questions, I'll move on. Thank you very much. So there's been a lot of preparation, as you can imagine, for these transitions on the outreach front, but also on the back end. So we had to update the functionality on our web forms and automated telephone system, because in some cases, the option would be to opt for Bright Choice for the first time, since that folks hadn't been able to opt for that necessarily, or in the case of Dublin, to remain on that choice. So there are different permutations for different customers in different jurisdictions. And so there's been a lot of preparation done on the back end for those. And then we also met with the staff of our member cities at least 4 times, probably more than that, over the past few months, to develop, in collaboration with them, customized community outreach plans for each of these jurisdictions. So that means developing city-specific content for their newsletters, social media, press releases, that sort of thing. And of course, we created city-specific landing pages for each of these jurisdictions as well. I think we can move on to the next slide, please. There's also advertising both in the conventional and the social kinds. We're running ads weekly in the East Bay Times, Pleasanton Weekly, and the Independent through both the months of December and January. So both before this transition occurs and during the transition itself. And then of course, we'll be running ads as well digitally and in language as well, Spanish, English, and Chinese. Events, as you can imagine, there aren't as many in-person events these days as there once were, but believe it or not, we are still at in-person events. In fact, our very own Juan Cortez and Dan Lieberman were at the Solano Winter Stroll just the other evening, which thankfully was outdoors. And this is not a comprehensive list, but I do want to point out that we are focusing a fair amount on our commercial customers for those cities that are going to be enrolling their commercial accounts in Renewable 100 as well. since the premium for Renewable 100 is volumetric, that penny per kilowatt hour or more, it can cost more for businesses than for residential customers since they use more energy. So we want to make sure that our commercial customers are well informed about this transition and that they know that they still have a lowest cost option, which would be EBCE's Bright Choice option. So the real goal here is to make sure people know what's happening and that they know that what their options are, including that lowest cost option, if that's going to be their primary concern. Moving on, please. So again, this isn't comprehensive, but EBCE is also hosting our own webinars for both residential and commercial customers separately, since the nuances are a little different, also in language in both Spanish and Chinese. Again, this is not comprehensive, but this is one of the ways in which we can answer questions in real time and be our own source of information here. So noticing, so just like when during an initial enrollment, there's also going to be public notice, a notice sent to each customer account. So every account in these cities, every eligible account that is, that's with EBCE service, is going to receive both a hard copy letter and a hard copy postcard. And for all those for whom we have a email on hand, which is actually quite a few, we'll also be sending email notices as well. And so at this point in time, these notices are already going out. The first notices, as you can see there, started going out in late November. And this first notice is going to continue to go out over the course of December. They don't all go out at once. They go out according to each account's meter read date. This is also in part to make sure that we're not inundating our call center, because our call center volume, as you can imagine, does increase when these notices go out. As you can see, over the last couple of weeks, we're sending out about 10,000 emails a day. And our call center volume is reflecting that. Our call center volume is up about 3 times what it usually would be, which is a very good sign. That's showing that people are getting the message, and they're usually calling in to ask for clarification. Lots of folks are calling to ask to choose the Bright Choice option, that cheapest option there. There are some folks who are opting out, but at this point, it doesn't seem like high numbers of folks are opting out. And we'll be able to report back to our board and to this committee what the percentages look like once we're a little further along with the noticing. In the next slide, you'll see just an example of what that notice looks like. As I mentioned, that this first notice that's going out is going to be in a sealed envelope, and it's going to feature both EBCE's logo and the city seal or the city's logo. So the examples you see here are from Hayward and Albany, but in the case of Dublin and Pleasanton, it'll be their city seals that are on there, just to make sure that folks see that recognize that this is not junk mail. This has the credibility of your local jurisdiction. And we changed it up with the second notice. That's a folded postcard, just to make sure that we're covering all bases. Some people seem to respond more to a sealed envelope, and others to something with more pictures and things of that sort. So this first notice, this is what it's going to look like here. In regards to commercial outreach, as I mentioned before, we're focusing on those larger customers, because they obviously would pay more for the Renewable 100 service. In some cases, they're fine with that, and in fact enthusiastic about being served by Renewable 100 and eliminating their energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. But we want to make sure that we can reach all those folks. So we also are doing so with personalized emails, and we're collaborating with the Chambers of Commerce. And in fact, we just presented to Pleasanton's Chamber of Commerce last week, and we're going to be presenting to both the Black and Latino business roundtables in Hayward. So again, this is not comprehensive, just a sample of the type of outreach that we're doing right now. As for next steps, so the second notice will go out in January, and that's when the actual service transitions will occur. So again, it's going to occur on the meter read date for our customers in January, and so they'll first see the bill charges if they do go ahead and transition to Renewable 100. The first bill charges they'll see will be in February. So there's other than the notice, nothing noticeable will change except that that's when the transition occurs and those charges will appear on the February bill. We're encouraging folks, if they don't want to have any Renewable 100 charges, to go ahead and opt for Bright Choice by December 22nd if they can, and that way they'll avoid being transitioned at all. And I should have said this sooner, but folks who have previously opted down or chosen Bright Choice in the communities that were defaulted to Brilliant 100, they will not be included in this enrollment. The thinking was that they had already made their decision to go for that lowest cost option, so we want to respect that. And then based on the preferences of the cities and the approval by our board, customers on care, FARA, medical baseline also will be defaulted to Bright Choice. But of course, they can choose Renewable 100 if they want. And we are in the process of developing the content for Berkeley and San Leandro's enrollments. Their first notices will go out in February for those March transition dates. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
That was so efficient. Just props in that direction. All right, Jim, sorry. First, are there any comments that have been submitted on this topic or members of the public with their hands raised?
Seeing no hands.
Okay, then Jim.
Yeah, this seems very relevant to the issue that Tom Kelly brought up at the beginning of the public comment, not specifically about this, but that the CO2 emissions equivalent from Bright Choice were going way up compared to the past years. So I guess the question is, what is this doing for overall emissions from East Bay Community Energy? And, you know, is it actually doing any good in terms of emission reductions? And that's a question.
So if I understand that the question is the transition to Renewable 100 as the default service going to improve greenhouse gas emissions from our customers?
Just as clarifier, is that purchase being accompanied by new development? So any actual new renewable energy that's coming from that? And does it drop emissions for EBCE as a whole, or only the people who are on it? Is that what I heard from you, Jim?
Yeah. What does this do as EBC? Are we just shifting emissions around and charging people differently, but still emitting the same amount? Because that seems like it would defeat what the cities are trying to do.
I can help address some of that, Alex, if you want me to take it.
Sure. I mean, I would start out by saying that Renewable 100 has a zero for its carbon factor. So assuming that a substantial portion of the electricity customers in these jurisdictions stay on Renewable 100, it will certainly help reduce our agency's overall emissions factor. Bright Choice is a a separate option, and I think that's what Mr. Kelly was talking about. Was there more to the question than that, or how are you?
What I heard was, how does this affect the greenhouse gas cumulatively for EBCE's overall emissions? We know that those customers will see a thing that says that they don't have any emissions, but does that change the mix that goes into Bright Choice? And does it change EBCE's overall reductions? But greater than that, my add-on would be, does it change the actual emissions that come out from the electricity sector in California or not? Or is that just shifting to somewhere else? Because
so the emissions factor that
renewable products from bucket 2 as opposed to actually creating new energy.
So first of all, bucket 2 has nothing to do with new build or old build. It has to do with in-state or out-of-state, just for clarification. So you can still certainly buy PCC ones, and it can be from existing facilities. I think Tom Kelly's comments related to our emissions factor were related to Bright Choice as a product. So if we increase the proportion of our customers that are on Renewable 100, it would absolutely reduce emissions on sort of an aggregate EBCE perspective. And that's not something that we've provided as part of the power content label or anything like that, because we always break it down per product. So as you increase that proportion, absolutely would reduce our emissions. Obviously, the reason our emissions have increased is mostly because of an accounting. I shouldn't say mostly; it is entirely because of an accounting change, as opposed to changes in our procurement practices of the types of energy that we're buying. So I want to note that as well. For what we are procuring for the Renewable 100s, and Olivia, to your question of whether it's new or not, the city's decisions to transition to Renewable 100 is somewhat irrespective of how we go and manage that sort of procurement risk. So certainly as we increase our renewables content, we will go and sign more and more contracts. Many of those contracts will be for new construction. As you're all aware, we've been quite active over the last couple of years, of course, signing new renewable build contracts as is. So we will continue to do that. And because we have an increase in sort of our renewable sort of portfolio mix with an increase in Renewable 100, and certainly we will need to go and sign more and more new contracts as well. Does that answer your question?
Without seeing spreadsheets divvying things up, yeah.
Sorry for jumping in on you, Jim. Cynthia?
Yes. I would like to see a way, if our, I think Tom Kelly mentioned this also, if our care customers, our FARA customers, and our medical baseline customers, if they chose to opt up to Renewable 100, I wonder if there was a way to subsidize the cost, Howard. I mean, how much that might be. It seems a little unfair that those of us who can afford, and it's probably more complicated than this, but let me put it in my simple way, that those of us who can afford Renewable 100 get it, and that our low-income communities only have access to, well, they practically only have access to Bright Choice, which is more obviously carbon intensive. Do you have any comment on that? I mean, would it be a large cost? What can we do to subsidize that cost if possible for those customers?
My comment on the cost is I don't know what that cost would be. Unfortunately, I don't know what the mix is, right? What care customers may already be elected on Renewable 100. So I would be taking a little bit of a wild guess on quantifying, so be hesitant to do that.
Yeah, I'd like at some point, I'm not going to make a recommendation at this point, but to staff, but I would like to see some cost and analysis of that.
And just to reiterate, these are the decisions that were made by each of the city councils. So they, in their decision making, they each requested that customers on Care, Fair, and Medical Baseline default to Bright Choice instead of Renewable 100. So when our board approved that, they were simply, following the preference of each of these jurisdictions that made that decision.
Thank you for the clarification.
Jim, is your hand still up or is it new?
No, I have forgot to lower it. I'm sorry.
Cynthia, do you have any other questions?
No, mine is down.
Okay. Are there any other members of this body that have questions? All right, then I'll ask mine real quick. These are decisions that were made by individual city councils. There's no motion in front of us. The board's not going to make any decisions. This is just an informational update that I wanted y'all to have too. I am curious, kind of going off of Cynthia's question, there was a board report. I don't remember if it was June or July because my brain's tired, but it went through and talked about how many of our customers are CareFair and medical baseline customers. And I believe that staff said that they believe that only 30% of folks eligible for those programs were actually signed up for them, which is one of the reasons that going around and getting folks signed up for those programs is such a good and important thing to be doing. But I'm wondering if EBC as an organization is taking a more proactive role in either door-to-door outreach in those same disadvantaged community census tracts, or has something set up for folks who probably do qualify, are not enrolled, since that's actually the majority of them. I mean, it's like a fifth of our customers that are already enrolled in CareFair or medical baseline customers, and if only 30% of folks, I mean, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of people that we're talking about having a fairly substantive potential raise in their, I mean, I don't know, solar and wind's super cheap right now, so maybe the rates won't go up at all. But I'm curious what we are doing as far as outreach to those communities, what that looks like, and if there's financial planning to assist those folks.
Yeah, so with regard to Care and Fair, part of being enrolled in Care and Fair, I think, is a prerequisite for some of the other assistance programs, such as AMP and perhaps CAP as well. So we're certainly working hard to encourage folks to enroll in those programs through various channels. But as far as the default for Renewable 100, is there something related to that you were thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we have all these communities that are defaulting to Renewable 100. Do we have, and it's okay if the answer is no, I'm just curious if we have particular outreach in place, acknowledging that staff's analysis said that about a third of customers who are eligible for Care and Fair are enrolled in it, and that there is the potential for people's bills to raise as they are defaulted into Renewable 100, and that such a large group of folks are not enrolled. So I know that we have this outreach program, which is really great. Are you concentrating it in areas that are defaulting to Renewable 100, or has there been thought given to how we address the large number in those communities who are about to experience bill increases?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the 2022 community outreach grants actually is a good example of that. So the AMP program is the highest priority there, but the CARE program is also part of what will be targeted through those outreach grants, through those collaborations with the community-based organizations that receive those grants. That's not to my knowledge, it's not going to be specifically targeted to these jurisdictions that are defaulting to Renewable 100. They'll be across our service.
All right, well, that was pretty much my question. So are there any further questions on this item? Jim, did you put your hand back up?
I did.
Okay, go for it.
And this is Alex. If it sounds like EBCE knows or has a very good idea of where the care and fair customers are, the care and fair eligible customers are even. Have you, in the negotiations and discussions with the city about it opting up, have you brought up, like 5% of your community is actually eligible but not enrolled, so their prices are going to go up? Whereas if they got enrolled, the prices wouldn't go up. Have you connected with the cities with the information that EBCE has about the demographics and the bill paying ability of their customers within those cities? Because I'm sure, or possibly, not that cities have any extra budget, but they might want to do something to prevent some of their customers from seeing, some of their more vulnerable customers from seeing electricity price increases.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a lot more that we could do to reach these customers, which is what I'm hoping that in part we'll get by our partnerships with the community-based organizations. But to answer your question, yes, we have discussed that with staff and to the councils, but primarily with staff. We meet regularly with the staff from all of our member jurisdictions on a monthly basis, and we've been asking for their support and their help reaching the best community-based organizations in their jurisdictions that can help us get more customers who are eligible enrolled in care and FARA. As far as sharing data with them about that's not something that I'm aware that we've done yet to date. Or if we have the data on what percentage of customers are eligible but not enrolled. I'm sorry, I don't have more information on that.
Yeah, on that last point, I'll just note, I think the information that we had to sort of inform that there are quite a number of customers who are eligible for care and FARA but not on care and FARA is fairly high level and demographic based. And so unfortunately, it's actually really challenging to get usable data that says this particular account is actually eligible based off of their income levels. And so we can really target the outreach to them. That's in part why we are trying to work with community-based organizations in particular to be more effective at that. That's one of the real challenges here. And we've actually gone out and purchased quite a number of data that we've tried to pilot that matches income level to our customer demographic information, that we have our account information and determine what are their income levels and how to go after them. And unfortunately, we found that the data is highly unreliable. Something like 50% of it is just completely erroneous. So we've done sort of pilots of like our own, like all staff's demographics, and we've asked, sort of friends and family in our service territory for them to validate their income levels relative to what we've bought, and it's not reliable. So we've struggled on this front of how to actually proactively go and seek customers and say, hey, one, you're eligible for care and FARA, so you should really sign up. And two, we haven't had the hard data that we're wanting to get to also go to a particular jurisdiction and say, hey, Oakland, this many of your customers exactly are care and FARA eligible, and they're not signed up, unfortunately. That's not by lack of effort. Unfortunately, we just haven't been able to get a lot of usable data there. So if people know of it, we certainly welcome any feedback and suggestions. I think the general information we've shared is more high-level demographic information that tell us directionally there is a significant portion of the population that is eligible that is not signed up, and we're going to try to, we're trying to pursue that, but it's limited data to support it, unfortunately.
All right, I'm gonna, sorry, Jim.
No, I was just saying, I assume you're looking at Cal Enviro screen and census districts.
So thank you for that. It is deeply appreciated. Again, this is an informational item that's going to the board that I wanted y'all to have. You're welcome to come hear more on Wednesday if you would like. It is 8:26 and there is no action required of this body on this item. So I am going to move us forward. The next item on our agenda is CAC member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas. I heard Ernie's request to place the issue raised by Joan, so we'll be reviewing that. Cynthia, did you have an announcement or something to place on an agenda?
Yes, I would like to place on the agenda the item that Tom Kelly brought up regarding the, he said the intensity of
Greenhouse
the,
gas emission intensities. Mhm.
yes, on of Bright Choice. If the staff were able to make a report on that, or if we could have an update on that. Yes.
Sure, we will definitely schedule that into a future agenda for sure.
Thank you.
Jim. Thanks, Cynthia.
I've seeing as how I was rolling on to the CAC, I looked back, skimmed over the original LDPP report and saw that there's supposed to be an update by 2023, a new plan, and obviously some reports back on sort of midstream of how we were doing. Obviously, COVID is throwing a monkey wrench in a lot of plans, but is there any chance of getting reports back from staff on what's happening?
We absolutely can talk with staff about agendizing that on a future item. Obviously, these things will not all be on next month because that would be too many. But yes, absolutely. That is a fantastic point. And thank you for the reminder that we are supposed to be circling back to that.
Okay.
Lisa?
Sure. I would love, and apologies if I missed this, I'd love an update from staff at a future meeting on the long ago item of the PG&E Jack London project. I remember Nick mentioning a while back that PG&E pulled out and kind of referencing ongoing discussions and was not able to offer more detail at that time. Now that it's several months down the line, I'm curious if there can be an update of that item. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was really great, y'all. So those things are heard. If you have any additional items that you'd like to see agendized, please email myself, Vice Chair Mutzenberg, and Clerk of the Board. Our deepest respects and well wishes to Adrian, and a profound thank you to Lori for stepping in and learning all of us. We really appreciate it. Sorry the meeting ran so late. Have a wonderful end of this year. And it's exciting that we will be starting the next year with such a engaged and knowledgeable body. It's really wonderful to have you all here. And this meeting is being adjourned to Monday, January 17th. 2022, is that correct, Lori?
2022.
Excellent. All right, then we will see you all then. Have a happy new year, y'all.
Same
Thank
to you. Happy holidays to everyone, including
Holidays.
Yeah.